J Garvey, founder, leader of National Citizens Alliance, NCA. Tonight we have a pretty profound information session on the multi-controlled opposition in Ottawa, and this is going to be tied to the Century Initiative, and then we're going to link it further into the Power Corporation and other corporations that have their strings on all the parties in Ottawa. And part of the strings is mass immigration, sustained mass immigration, and we're going to show evidence of this, of why all the parties in Ottawa, every single one of them in Ottawa, supports sustained mass immigration, eventually turning Canada to a UN globalist village and replacing the traditional populations of Canada. And I should preface this that the National Citizens Alliance of Canada, NCA, is the only party running in 2019 that will end sustained mass immigration. We support reducing immigration to 50,000 or less per year in total. That's our commitment, and we are 100% behind that. And the reason we can take that position, after tonight you will have clear evidence as to why, but I'll tell you the fundamental reason. We're not tied to the Power Corporation or any other globalist corporation. We're a fully independent party, fully grassroots, uncontrolled opposition. And that's what's lacking in Ottawa. They're all controlled, and we're going to show evidence tonight. This is going to go quite deep into the corruption and the undemocratic nature of federal democracy. It's not even democracy. It's pseudo-democracy in Canada. And we're hoping to change that, but we need your support, the support of your friends, your family, en masse, if you believe in our agenda. And I'm going to get right into this. I'm going to be playing a bunch of videos. I'm going to give you a lot of information to consider. You know, at the end of the day, we provide the facts to you. You make up your own mind. That's what we're all about. We want to give you the facts so you and your family, you and your friends can make the best decision for yourselves and our country. That's why we do these videos. You're not getting that in the mainstream media. They're dumbing you down. They're misinforming you. A lot of times they're indoctrinating you into some kind of agenda. A lot of times it's the globalist agenda. So get ready for a lot of really interesting facts. We're going to dig deep tonight, and this is going to touch every one of those globalist parties in Ottawa tonight. And we're going to start right in on the Century Initiative. Here it is right here. This is all about pushing. This is a bunch of globalist corporations behind this, and they got academics behind it, and there's some media companies behind this group. I'm going to get further into that, but they want Canada to reach 100 million by 2100, and that works out to 777,000 a year in order to reach that goal. If that's not troubling enough, the projection right now is for over 53 million by 2050. 53 million, that's almost doubling our population right now. It's unbelievable. These globalists in Ottawa, these globalist sellouts, they're just pushing their agenda on the Canadian people. Well, the good news is you have a choice now through NCA. We can put a stop to all this nonsense. So let's get further into Century Initiative. And there's our current immigration minister. They're promoting there. It says economic growth and prosperity. How immigration benefits the middle class. What a bunch of nonsense. There's just spinning. This is an example of the spins and the misinformation. They're linking mass immigration to economic growth and prosperity. And we're going to refute that tonight. That's one of all the parties do it in Ottawa. They all have that in their platforms. how it's great for the economy. Go check it out. And let's go to the About Us today. And this, I'm going to play a little excerpt from this video. It's a propaganda video of this group, and they have marketers who are behind it, not surprisingly, who are pushing their agenda, which is the same as the agenda as the federal government and so a lot of these provincial governments and municipal governments. So here's some propaganda for you.
Many people dream of coming to Canada.
We have a really great Canada, and we're really, really lucky to be here.
I love our diversity. I love the tolerance we have for one another.
Canada's an accepting society.
Canada is a good place to raise your family.
At its root, it's a country where anybody can prosper.
The image of Canada is very good, it's very strong. But would that continue to be that way in the next 20 to 30 years? It's an important question.
The Century Initiative, for me, is about defining a great project for Canada. A project that will, by the year 2100, have a material positive difference on Canada.
The country is no longer growing in a positive way. GDP is flat to declining, our innovation's not great. And we have a demographic bulge of a lot of my generation moving through the system, moving through the pipeline, and not enough people to support them.
Historically, the track record's pretty clear that Canadian economy and Canadian GDP growth and Canadian role in the world has frankly corresponded directly with population growth. There's a prototype there as to what works and what doesn't work. If you look at the demographics of where we are today, we could be reaching a place where we start to regress. If there's one thing about Canada that I'm very proud of, it's that historically, generation after generation has improved this society and left it better than they found it for the generation that follows. I say with some guilt that I'm not sure that's going to be the case for my children, and or certainly not my grandchildren.
The goal of 100 million people by 2100 is an important goal. It means that Canada can keep up in terms of GDP growth, in terms of our place in the world, in terms of our influence, in terms of our economic prosperity.
So there you have the spin by these corporate globalists. They have their marketers, and they're pushing, just like the government, they're pushing diversity. They're telling you that you have to be tolerant, accepting of all people of the world in your country. That's some of their spins. And then they talk about economic growth. They're peddling a lie there. If you look at any of the studies on immigration, mass immigration, there's very little correlation between economic growth, increased individual per capita income, and immigration. They're peddling a lie. They're talking about improving the society. How's improving the society? By tripling our population, increasing crime, increasing, multiplying exponentially the ethnic enclaves, turning us into this UN globalist village, eroding completely our identity, our heritage, our cultural norms, our traditional values. How is that progress? And they're promoting fear now. They're saying if we don't do this, we're not going to grow. We're not going to prosper. This is all just spins and lies to the Canadian people. Like I said, all the economic studies that I've looked at, there is minimal correlation between immigration and economic growth. And in fact, individual per capita incomes go down, as many Canadians see. We also have to factor in artificial intelligence, which is coming fast, and we're projected to lose up to 40% of our jobs. And yet these globalist corporations are pushing for 100 million. Why? So they themselves can make more money. There's more tax dollars, more control, more profit for them, while the majority Canadian people, their lives go down. That's the truth. So let's get back into this. This is I want to show another video here. This is their spin on immigration right here. I'm going to play a little excerpt from that. Again, you can see the globalist agenda of them and this UN globalist village that they're purporting to.
We are a country of immigrants. We are a country of refugees. My family came here as refugees, and many other Canadians are either first generation, second generation, or can certainly trace back their heritage to immigrants who came to this country.
I think around the world, many people dream of coming to Canada, not only because of the values, but also I think that the tolerance.
I never felt like I didn't belong here. This is not my country, and I've continued to believe that it's the most hopeful country in the world because of just how we treat each other.
The fact of the matter is that we are an aging population, and our fertility rates are not even replacing our population. The dependency ratio is becoming a little problematic. We are constantly facing labor shortages. We are constantly facing skill shortages. We are facing population declines in certain areas of the country. And immigration is important for all of those things. Immigration is not a silver bullet. It is not the only solution. It is one tool in a toolkit that has many different tools, but we have to use that tool well.
I don't think we're going to continue to develop to the extent our country is capable of unless we bring more people here. We know for a fact that we're not all having a lot of kids. An example of that, I only have one daughter.
So there you go. There are more spins and misinformation there. First off, it's this is basically coming out of the federal government. They say we are a country of immigrants and refugees now. When Canada was created through pioneers and settlers who came over from Europe primarily. These people were not immigrants. They were pioneers and settlers and their offspring, and they became indigenous to Canada. They were the first Canadians. So they're spinning a false line here that we're all immigrants, which is false. And NCA is not against immigrants, but we support responsible, balanced immigration. We don't support mega immigration, and we definitely don't support tripling our population. So a bunch of globalist corporations can benefit, while most Canadians suffer. They also talk about the aging population and the lower fertility rates. So why isn't the government encouraging our traditional families to have larger families by creating the financial incentives? That's what NCA supports. But they want to replace us. They want to replace the traditional populations. They talk about labor shortage, skill shortages, while NCA supports retraining Canadian workers. There's at least 8% to 10% of Canadians out of work. We should be getting them back to work instead of bringing in all this cheap labor in, all these immigrants here, which are only adding to the unemployment and problems in Canada. And I think most Canadians agree with us. This is utter nonsense what they're peddling. So I'm going to dig a little deeper into this. And I'll show you here. This is a really good graph I want to show. Right here. This is the population of Canada. And you can see most of it is within 100 kilometers of the U.S. border. Look at that. Where the bright yellow is, that's where the greatest concentration is. All this area up here is boreal forest. You get into the permafrost up here. It's basically inhabitable. You see that? There's all kinds of nasty climate, very cold weather. In the summer, the mosquitoes, the black flies, you name it. But they want to triple this. Imagine that. Triple that. Unbelievable. These are going to be mega cities, mega slums. That's what they're looking for. Just keep this in mind. And now I'm going to look at the team here. These are the founders here, and you notice they're investment firms. A lot of them are tied to real estate. Some of them are in academia. We got banks involved in this who are going to benefit from the mass immigration, and who do benefit from it. We got media people involved. Again, more investment firms. So let's go up to the top here. Right here, look here. Andre Desmarais. And he's the co-CEO of the Power Corporation of Canada. And we're going to get into Andre Desmarais. He has strings. Him and his brother Paul have strings on all these parties in Ottawa. And this gentleman is behind the mass immigration. The Desmarais are the most powerful and most well-off family in Canada, and they have ever since 1970s they've had strings on who the PM is in Canada. That's how much political power they have, and again. They bring in some students here to make it look good, just like the government. But these are all corporate people who are benefiting from mass immigration. Mistake not. And then they bring this guy, Professor Robert Steiner. He's with the Monk School of Global Affairs, which links into this globalist agenda. But we're going to concentrate on this gentleman tonight, the Power Corporation. Very powerful, a lot of strings. And if we go further, this is the Power Corporation of Canada, and they say they're aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals from Agenda 2030, which Stephen Harper adopted for Canada in 2015. And this agenda is being implemented by all levels of government in Canada. And I'm not sure if they're really implementing this, but they're promoting it on their page, the Power Corporation. This agenda, and we have a video on it, information session on Agenda 2030. Go look it up on our Facebook or YouTube page. But this agenda is about global communism, global citizenry, open borders. It's against Canadian sovereignty, Canadian citizenry. It's all about global world order. Mistake not. If we dig a little deeper, this is Desmarais talking. I'm going to play a little excerpt here because this will give you some insight on how this gentleman thinks. This is on refugees, and this was in 2017, December.
Continue to move forward, and also we have to be very careful in society to not put everybody into the same pot. It's not because there's a few crackpots that all Muslims are there. I don't believe that. I have a lot of friends in the Middle East all over the place that are just so sad about everything that's happened, and I think that we have to keep very fresh and open-hearted towards people who are having a lot of difficulties. And I was very happy to see that the Syrian immigrants are being accepted in Canada at a faster pace, and I think that's the sort of country that reflects the values that we've always had.
Yeah.
So there you have it. This is basically out of the federal government. He's supporting all the refugees coming in, the Syrian refugees, and this is in December 7, 2017. Myself, back in mid-2015, I was supportive of some Syrian refugees coming in, as most Canadians were. You know, babies were floating up on the beach, and we were getting all these stories in the media. And but in late 2015, I changed my tune once I had the facts of the infiltration of the refugee program coming in with extremists. And also the fact that there was inadequate screening, and again, ISIS infiltration, and the whole issue of political Islam and radical extremism. So, you know, since then, I've changed my views. But notice Andre Desmarais, you know, this is December 2017, and he's still pushing for more and more of these refugees, and he's very happy with it. So this aligns with the UN Agenda 2030 and this globalist agenda. And just remember those remarks by him, because they mirror the government. Is the power corporation dictating to the government? It's a chicken or egg, but you make up your own mind. I'm going to shift here. This is on the finance minister's key advisors, economic advisors, are part of the Century Initiative. They want 100 million Canadians by 2100. So you can see the power corporation and some of these globalist leaders are in the government. They're actually key advisors pushing for this super sustained mass immigration. And the gentleman here, this was a gentleman named Baines, who's pushing for the 100 million mark in government. He's actually in the government. And there's this guy, Barton, Baines and Barton. And here's Dominic Barton. He's a powerful global managing director, consulting firm of McKinsey and Company. And Mark Wiseman, a senior managing director for investment management giant BlackRock Incorporated. So these are the two economic advisors that are actually in the government, advising the government. Key economic advisors, and they support the 100 million. This here is a really good video. Canada abolishes itself. This is by Black Pigeon Speaks. I'm going to play the ending here because this gentleman makes a really good point against the mass immigration, the sustained mass immigration.
Link to the notes. Simply put, the West cannot use other people's children to continue its own civilization. A civilization, I might add, that wherever it has gone has created societies that are the envy of the world, and the reason that people are drawn to it and leave the failure and dysfunction of their own civilizations behind in a hope of enjoying the fruits of prosperity, freedom, and liberalism that Western people have built for themselves over centuries. The paradox is that as the West and countries like Canada willingly give away that which was bequeathed them through the toil, blood, sweat, and tears of their ancestors, they are most likely also destroying the hopes for peace and social cohesion for all, if something is not changed very soon, as the numbers that are set to arrive and are on their way are so great that the Western society they hope to live in and benefit from will, for all intents and purposes, be a thing of the past. So remind me again, why is it such a great idea that virtually every single country in the West is going down the same road or the same drain as Canada? What are your thoughts? Can the West...
I'm gonna play that again to make sure everyone heard it. He's making some very good points there.
Notes. Simply put, the West cannot use other people's children to continue its own civilization. A civilization, I might add, that wherever it has gone has created societies that are the envy of the world, and the reason that people are drawn to it and leave the failure and dysfunction of their own civilizations behind in a hope of enjoying the fruits of prosperity, freedom, and liberalism that Western people have built for themselves over centuries. The paradox is that as the West and countries like Canada willingly give away that which was bequeathed them through the toil, blood, sweat, and tears of their ancestors, they are most likely also destroying the hopes for peace and social cohesion for all, if something is not changed very soon, as the numbers that are set to arrive and are on their way are so great that the Western society they hope to live in and benefit from will, for all intents and purposes, be a thing of the past. So remind me again, why is it such a great idea that virtually every single country in the West is going down the same road or the same drain as Canada? What are your...
There you have that. That's really good insight. It's talking about the replacement of our traditional populations, replacement of our values, our identity, our way of life, our heritage, our cultural norms. This is what's happening. Through the power corporation, these other corporate globalists who have their strings on every party in Ottawa. That's why they all push the mass immigration. They are strained to these corporate globalists, especially the power corporation. I'm going to dig a bit deeper into this. This is an article in the Globe and Mail, and it's on the power corporation. So this will go into how much power this family has. Paul Desmarais got control of the power corporation in 1968. The same time Pierre Trudeau gets control of Ottawa. In 1971, Brian Mulroney was a young lawyer of Paul Desmarais. Daniel Johnson Jr. and Paul Martin start working for Paul Desmarais, the latter at Canada Steamship Lines. In 1981, Andre Desmarais marries France Chrétien, the daughter of Jean Chrétien. Paul Desmarais sells Canada Steamship Lines to Paul Martin, the former Prime Minister, who makes his fortune with it. 1983, Mulroney wins the Conservative leadership, as in Mulroney's unsuccessful 1976 bid. Paul Desmarais is said to have bankrolled the campaign of Mulroney in 1983. So you see the strings of the power corporation. They're on Pierre Trudeau, they're on Paul Martin, they're on Jean Chrétien, they're on Mulroney. Jean Chrétien winning the Liberal leadership campaign is run out of John Ray's power office. John Ray works for the Power Corporation, and John Ray led the campaign for Jean Chrétien. 1994, Brian Mulroney brokers Power Corp's entree into China. 1996, Power Boards Not Atypical includes Poles, former Ontario Premier Bill Davis, and former Federal Finance Minister Don Mazinkowski. Its international board, advisory board includes Trudeau and Mulroney. This is on the Power Corporation's board, Trudeau and Mulroney, and they got these former finance ministers, former Ontario Premier. And this is more on Quebec politics. There are links to Jean Charest. In 2000, John Ray, who's on the inside of Power Corporation, helps lead 3 successful campaigns of Chrétien. 2005, Brian Mulroney ensures Stephen Harper and Paul Desmarais are on friendly terms as the globalist conservatives head into power under Harper. Desmarais connections in the cabinet include Maxime Bernier and Peter MacKay. So Bernier and MacKay are connected to the Power Corporation. 2006, John Ray runs Bob Ray's campaign for the federal leadership. So this is a connection to the NDP here, Bob Ray. So that's good insight there. You can see how it's connecting to everyone, the Power Corporation. This is more on it. This is another article. It says here that Desmarais family has strong connections to Canada's 4 major political parties, and now include Bernier's globalist party, include that in there, and this goes into what I just shared. The Power Corp controls everyone. Everyone knows that. Chrétien, Johnson, it's Power Corp. So this article is all about the Power Corporation. They have strings on all the parties in Ottawa. And this Power Corporation, a lot of the two big holdings are in financial, insurance, and mutual funds. And if you look at their board, it's full of bankers, banks, BMO Financial, Baraco Corporation, Bombardier, CIBC, Canadian Pacific Rail, R&R. Just look through this. A very powerful corporation. Apparently, they've been at the Bilderberg, they've been at the Trilateral Commission, they have ties to the Rockefeller, they have ties to the Rothschild, to the World Bank, to the IMF, obviously to the United Nations. And they're pushing Agenda 2030, as I already showed. So this is very troubling. And what it's showing is that these corporations, globalist corporations, have strings on all those parties in Ottawa. That's what we call multi-controlled opposition. And what they've done is, it doesn't matter which one of those parties gets in, they're going to be pursuing the same agenda as the puppet masters who control them. Most significantly, the Power Corporation and Paul and Andre Desmarais. This is what's going on. This is why nothing ever changes. This is why all those parties in Ottawa support mass immigration. Another reason they don't touch CPP, because the Power Corporation is handling a lot of the pension funds. Yet they're strained to the Power Corporation, so they're not going to deal with those CPP. They're just going to let things stay the same. So this is what's going on. This is why we think it's a pseudo-democracy right now. It doesn't matter which one of them gets in, because they have strings on all of them. And I'm just going to bring this up here. This is this goes into it a little further here. This shows the connection of Bernier actually to George Soros and the Tides Foundation. Can you believe it? The director of Bernier's party is connected with George Soros's funded Tide Foundation. And this is evidence of that. And when Bernier was minister, he was actually supporting what's called social economy initiatives, which is tied to George Soros and the Tides Foundation. Harper ended up scrapping it, but this is evidence on that. And I'm just going to shift to one thing here. I want to show something else here. Just give me a second. But you can see what's going on here. The opposition, the controlled opposition, they're all tied. They all have strings to these globalist corporations. These globalist corporations are supporting the global world order, UN Agenda 2030. That's why all of them in Ottawa support the mass immigration, and that's the reason nothing ever changes. So it's very important that you support NCA, because we're fully grassroots uncontrolled opposition. And there was a video I was going to show. It actually was of the Rebel News, and they were arguing that because the Liberals got in, they said, well, Demaray's in power again. And then during the video, they talked about, they did qualify and say Mulroney is connected to Demaray, which no one can deny. But they didn't talk about Harper and Bernay, who are fully connected to Demaray as well. And the evidence shows that. And I have to play, there's a couple other videos. Just bear with me here. I'm gonna play them now, and this is gonna shed further light on this. Just give me a second here. I wanna play this video. Where here it is, right here. I believe it is.
There's your island.
I'm going to find this video. I have to play it here. There's some great insight into this video. Here's the video here. I'm going to play this now. There's some great stuff in here. Just give me a second here. And this will back up everything I've been saying.
United States through various think tanks and
corporations and boards of directors, but also they even have connections with the major European financial dynasties, including the Rothschilds. A member of a European Rothschild bank is also on the board of directors of Power Corporation. Their influence within Canada is especially interesting to the political class. There's not a single prime minister in Canada since the 1970s that is not in some way connected with the Desmarais family. So you had Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who had close connections to the Desmarais and Power Corporation, and after he left office, he joined the board of Power Corporation. Of course, Brian Mulroney rose through the ranks at Power Corp, and has been a long-time family ally. Paul Martin also rose through the ranks. Jean Chrétien's daughter married Andre Desmarais. So they're actually family connections in some instances. And then with Stephen Harper today, we also have connections through some of his ministers who have either come from Power Corporation or left to go join Power Corporation. And apparently the connections between Harper and the Desmarais were facilitated by Brian Mulroney, no less. And so they have connections also with Bob Rae from the NDP, with the Parti Québécois, so all of Canada's main political parties, and especially in Quebec, where the Desmarais family are based, right here in Montreal. And they have extensive connections with Quebec's current premier, who may not be premier for a couple more weeks, Jean Charest, and the Liberal Party here, as well as the Parti Québécois. So they really have their fingers in every dish, so to speak.
So there you have that. That's backing up everything I've been saying, but you can see how they're just controlling everyone in Ottawa. They have strings on all those parties, all those entities in Ottawa. There's a revolving door between getting positions in government and getting on the boardrooms in the Power Corporation and other corporations. And remember the mass immigration, the Century Initiative. And you can see how all those puppet parties in Ottawa, they all push the same agenda. Pushing mass immigration, doing nothing on CPP. Unbelievable. And they say nothing about Agenda 2030. None of those parties. They don't want any Canadians to know about it. I'm going to play more of this video. It's going to shed further light into this.
Off this food for oil deal, and it's not really about money. At some point these elites get so much money that I don't think it's about money so much as it is about power. That money is nothing but a tool to provide a means to control government. Okay, for example, the Paul Desmarais was involved with an organization called the Canadian Competitive Council, which basically wrote the entire security and prosperity partnership agreements between the United States and Canada. I mean, this man is directly working to get Canada to divest itself of its national sovereignty. People are protesting right now against the oil pipelines coming out of the tar sands project in Alberta, and at the same time these guys are investing in railways, knowing that the pipeline will never get built because they're funding the protest against the pipeline, while at the same time they're investing in extra tankers so that they could move it by rail. They never really wanted to build the pipeline in the first place. So, what happens is they end up buying both sides of a conflict and playing them against each other, knowing what the outcome will be, and they do the same thing in politics. You could say, oh, Paul Desmarais controls the Liberal Party. Well, he controls the Conservative Party as well. And when it comes election time, it doesn't matter whether you vote conservative or liberal. The guy that Paul Desmarais has put in that position is still going to get elected prime minister.
So there you have that, doubling down on that. You see how they have strings on all those parties. It doesn't matter which one gets in. And this explains why it's always the same. It doesn't matter which one of those globalist mainstream parties gets into power. So just remember this. And National Citizens Alliance is standing in full, uncontrolled grassroots opposition. So we're the ones that can really facilitate change. Remember that. It's never going to happen through those globalist parties. They're all stringed. They're all controlled. That's why we call them controlled opposition. And I have to credit to these globalist corporations like Power Corporation. They're smart. String all those parties and then you're guaranteed to get what you want. However, that's bad for the Canadian people. That's bad for democracy. And it's basically a quiet dictatorship. And we stand in opposition to that. What's the point of having elections then? We might as well shut down the whole system and just be like China and have one party. Why go through the facade of having elections if it's all controlled? So let's get behind NCA. I'm going to play another clip that's going to tie this into the global world order.
Into the political process null and void, since that entire political process seems to be bought and paid for long ago. And unfortunately, as I'm sure many of the listeners to this podcast and to the alternative media generally will know, for a lot of people, the constant putting up of people like the Rockefeller
their associations around. This has been long planned for through organizations like the Bohemian Grove and the Council of Foreign Relations and organizations like
and the
this.
Trilateral Commission, to which the Desmarais also have ties. Trilateral
Commission, exactly, and the conference that they just had in the United States, the
Bilderberg?
The Bilderberg, thank you. My mind just went blank there for a minute. The Bilderbergs, exactly. And these are all organizations that Paul Desmarais is very closely associated with. You know, and so what these people want is a one-world government. They want to consolidate everything they've got. You know, right now, these holding companies, they work with other people who are in the same position. Like a very close associate of Paul Desmarais is Belgian financier Albert Ferre, who's like the European counterpart to Paul Desmarais, and their interests get so intertwined. And you got to keep in mind, they're not only working with their own money. It's not like one rich guy with a big pile of money. These holding companies are involved in financial institutions. You know, their official stances is that they're taking care of other companies' pension funds, for example. Paul Desmarais has control over most of the pension funds in Canada. Well, you know, that's money that he's playing with too. And it's easy for one corporation to buy another corporation under this holding company. And, you know, you could spend a lifetime just dissecting the financial connections with a company like Power Corp. You know, and in the long run, they're not only playing with their own money, they're playing with everybody's money. Because he's got control of that money through his financial companies, through the banks that he controls, through the massive pension funds that he controls. And in my opinion, eventually, they're probably looking to just wipe the slate clean. You know, I think basically we're heading for a complete financial collapse. Now, mind you, this is just my opinion, but this is the way I see things coming down. You know, Europe is so close to financial collapse. Just Greece or Portugal or Italy or any one of those countries pulling out of the European Union could collapse the euro. The same true for the American dollar. The American dollar is being propped up in such a precarious manner right now. Very many good economists are expecting it to fall apart right after the U.S. Federal elections. So what happens if the euro fails and the American dollar fails at the same time? Well, you've got a worldwide collapse of currency. I think what's going to happen is the currencies are going to collapse. They're going to allow a period of mayhem in the streets and hardship on people because the economy will basically stop. Nobody will have access to their money in the banks. The supermarket shelves will go empty. I don't think they'll allow this mayhem for a long period of time, but just long enough to scare the hell out of everybody. And then they're going to come in as a World Bank through the World Bank and the UN and come out with a world currency. You know, in other words, reset the whole thing. And what these people are basically doing is looking to consolidate the power that they already have to make it more easily, you know, because if you don't have to worry about all the value of all these different currencies, you know, it's easy to take money from Canada and buy a corporation in China, you know, or take money from a holding company in England and buy a diamond mine in Zimbabwe.
So there you have that. Just tying it into Agenda 2030, one world currency. And I'm just going to play one last video here. This video here, this is a good example of media manipulation. Just give me a second here while this, get rid of this ad. I'm going to play it here. So this video will start at 1:51. This is on Rebel News, and one of the classic techniques of manipulation is information you don't share. So we encourage our members, our supporters, to always keep an eye out for it. It's not only what the media is saying, it's what they're not saying. And this example pertains to the Power Corporation. I'm going to play it here.
Just in case you think it's only liberals, well, Brian Mulroney has a relationship so close with the Desmarais family, he says he's like a brother. And now the Desmarais are back. Power Corp is back. It's almost laughably absurd that a company that has half a dozen or so former prime ministers and other senior politicians under their thumb would call themselves Power Corp.
Okay, there you have. That's a really good example of media manipulation. They only linked Brian Mulroney to Desmarais. But I showed you evidence, repeated evidence, of Stephen Harper linked to Desmarais, Maxime Bernier linked to Desmarais, Peter MacKay linked to Desmarais. But they don't want you to know that, Rebel News. So that's media manipulation. That's a classic example of media manipulation. And I'm gonna wrap this up now, but basically what we're telling you tonight is that all these parties are stringed to the Power Corporation, other globalist corporations. These corporations are supporting Century Initiative, $100 million by 2100. That's why all these parties in Ottawa support sustained mass immigration, and they're only going to up it more and more. These globalist corporations are also behind UN Agenda 2030, which Harper signed Canada onto. They're behind Global World Order, One World Currency. The Democrats are connected to all the globalist elites around the world, Rothschild, Rockefeller, World Bank, United Nations, on and on and on. So this is what's happening. So we encourage everyone to digest this information. It's very important. It shows that it doesn't matter which one of these parties in Ottawa gets in, because they're just stringed. They're going to be pushing the same agenda. That's why it's very important for you to support NCA. We are true grassroots, uncontrolled. We have zero ties to Power Corporation, to any of these corporations. And we don't want any ties. We thrive off our independence, our authenticity, and our commitment to the Canadian people, our country. We don't believe these globalist corporations should be dictating through these parties to the Canadian people. That's not democracy. That is a dictatorship. We don't support that. So please get behind the NCA. Share this message tonight. We might do a summary on Thursday, but we will let everyone know. But please share our message tonight. Thank you for joining me.